Do I make on YouTube? I don't make any.
You are monetized.
I have no idea. Cassie Lifowitz takes care of all that. All I do is I send her the talks, and she does what she does. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I've talked about why there is this channel. It's mainly for my children, not so much for money. Yeah. I think you have to be like, if you have over 1 million subscriptions, then maybe you can make a few dollars. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo created a channel for himself just a couple months ago. One night, in 24 hours, he had over 20 million followers. Can you believe that? He's like a soccer porn star. Yeah, but until then, yeah.
You asked the role in issues to make the music.
Okay. I'll probably forget, but if I remember. There you go, yeah. You say, yo, what's wrong with you? Yeah. Cassie. Nailing anything?
Oh.
Good job. Mix? Armand just looks like a prophet sitting there.
Well, to bring a little emphasis, I took your philosophy class. Do you know anything about the brain hemisphere theory?
No. Sorry. Yeah.
And claim to love someone that you love.
Yeah.
That's real love.
Yeah.
Why can you cheat on someone that you love?
Before we wrestle with that particular issue, a couple of questions. You ask because you're curious, you ask because you've experienced it, and if you have experienced it, is it intimate in the sense that it's your life, or is it the life of two people you really cared for, but one transgressed, resulting in the disruption of relationship which impacted you? If it's mere curiosity, we can talk about it, but it's uninteresting. If it's just curiosity. If it's something that you yourself personally experienced, either because of you and your own relationship or people close to you, then we can talk about that. But that may be a little too personal for you to reveal, so let's just talk about it. Is that okay? There is this assumption that human beings are wired to be monogamous. They're not. There are only a few animals out there, and if you consider human beings to be part of the natural world, there are only a few who practice monogamy. Human beings, because there is just something, you can call it a flaw, or you can just call it, this is the way we've been designed. That's the first thing you need to kind of understand. That some things have been forced upon us. One of them happens to be, I think, monogamy. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You know, it doesn't mean that if your mom spanks you and you're forced to sit by the piano and keep playing, even though you're disgusted by the piano, that in 10 years' time you won't benefit from it. Because when life breaks you, you will come to realize that perhaps music is the only one that can shelter you. Okay? But the force, in as much as you disliked it, it ultimately became your Messiah, a saving grace. We are naturally the sort of animals that gravitate towards things that they find attractive. I don't know why. And the problem with attraction is that there comes a point where just looking at it is not enough. I just don't want to look at you sipping a cup of coffee if the coffee smells good. And then when I look at you drinking your coffee with such an intense amount of pleasure, something happens to me. I begin to salivate like a dog. I want that. Anything that contains any element of beauty is sublime. It kind of just gives you wings and you want to fly. Also, you don't cheat in hopes of getting caught. So in many ways, you're blinded by the intense pleasure that at first you're gaining from a distance. And then little by little, as pleasure kind of just expands, it occupies more room inside you, there comes a point where you say, I don't know how you met your boyfriend, but something about him attracted you. And then there comes a point where you begin to fantasize about holding his hand, or maybe him you. And eventually it happened. But lust and greed, when it comes to romantic relationships, are really, really, really good. Because from the fantasy of holding hands and its eventual obtainment, now you move on to, I wonder how it would feel if we were to like touch shoulders, and you do, but it doesn't end there. Unless you kind of discover some behavioral issues where you just begin to not like him as much. But if there are no disturbances, no wrinkles in the relationship at this point, you begin to fantasize some more. I wonder how the kissing will feel. And there you do. And perhaps one of the most important things that has always existed in many cultures, virginity. Not so much for a man, but for a woman. Because it is a thing that you have to sacrifice. And you do so because you may be in the grips of passion, you may be in love, but it was a thing that was mostly very highly valued in human cultures across the world. And so you ultimately give this person a gift. He is going to be the first person that's going to capture you, okay? And the only reason is the only way that passion can come full circle, to close, to find absolute fulfillment, is sex. It's like looking at a cup of coffee that smells good is not enough. You have to drink it. Standing outside. Consider that when you walk on College Avenue, there are all these restaurants around. And, as you're walking from point A to point B, you see some people eating Chinese food, and it looks really, really good on the plate. And all of a sudden, you just feel hungry. It's a feeling you didn't have, but all of a sudden comes about. Or they're having Indian food, or a hamburger, whatever the case may be. All of a sudden, because the dish looks so good, your brain chemistry begins to change. And all of a sudden, you begin to have a certain kind of passion. I want Chinese food. I want Indian food. I want a burger with fries, And then you go in. And what all these things indicate is that once you become attracted to something and enough passion is generated, you will do, if it's in your pocket, if you have the resources, you will do what you can to go inside and purchase it. And all of us in this class, if you have the funds, we do it. Okay? Now imagine that I don't know how old the stats are, but these days it's 50-50. Men cheat 50%, women cheat 50%. Okay? So just to review, there may be a good indication that human beings are not monogamous, and it's something that society, religion, philosophy, culture has imposed upon us, and it's not a bad thing. Second, something happens to us when we find ourselves attracted to something. Okay? And if you have the luxury of time, you pursue it. And initially, you're not going to say to yourself, I think I'm going to cheat or sleep with this person. It doesn't work that way. We have these dances, we flirt, and it feels good. Okay. And then the flirtatiousness kind of explodes a little bit, and then you like it. you're going to like anything that's going to bring you to life. As simple as that. There is another thing that you need to really, really consider. Long-term relationships. How long you been with this man? This young infantile boy? Okay. So no doubt, from your own personal experience, you can certainly conclude that in long-term relationships, there will come a point where your relationship becomes stale. It has no seasoning anymore. You know, initially when you begin to like someone, you are removed from yourself. You're removed from burdens of life. Your only focus is this guy. As you spend more and more time with him, what time does, all of a sudden the things that didn't exist in the relationship begin to exist. Rust, boredom, frustration. In love, you give your companion things he doesn't really deserve. You say, he's the most intelligent man I've ever encountered. It's not because he is intelligent, it's just you're in love and you're blind. And when you're blind, you're stupid. You know, it's because you can't see things the right way. And when you're in love, you forgive, you forget, you exercise compassion, you do all sorts of things that they're not really human qualities. They're just gifts that are given to you at the moment of love. The moment that emotion dissipates, dims, goes away a little, you return back to your body. Now expectations come about. Now the politics of life come about. Now you have your own life. So you walk in the world as one single human being. You encounter another human being who's also very much one single human being. The two ones come together. They don't make a two. It's just two people coming together. And there's going to come a point where you're going to go back to being just the one. Is it not true that once in a while you look at your man and you say, you used to write poetry for me, what the hell happened? You used to bring me flowers, what the hell happened? We used to sit and talk about this and that. Now we just sit and watch TV. That's what happens. Time creates boredom in all relationships. And then you go somewhere. You look at someone else. They happen to be not your companion. And all of a sudden something about you happens. Something that happened to you when you met your companion. You grew wings. And you like that. So you pursue it. And you cheat not because you're not in love with your companion, but because life just takes things from you and you want them back. But the way you want them back kind of creates a lot of friction and pain and disappointment. There is another thing that you need to kind of also keep in mind is that women usually suffer a great amount of loss. I don't have an expiration date, but you do. You're valued for your looks, you're valued for your body, you're valued for being able to make babies. You have an expiration date. So when you hang out with losers, it's like a bomb that's about to go off. It's just a matter of time before you realize you're old, you're ugly, unattractive, and you can no longer have babies. And now you go back, review your life, and you realize your life has sucked. And there is no future. And no one's going to want you. Okay? What this culture does is that first it creates people who are very, very lonely and sad and depressed. Loneliness is not fun. Depression is not fun. So what do? It's like not having any food. What happens when you don't have food? Oh, you're going to be hungry. Hunger is a painful thing. And what happens when people are starving? They're willing to eat anything. You come from a different state to here. Who do you have? You have no friends, right? You're new to this town. No one desires to be alone. You know, you have no family, no siblings. You don't have history with anyone. You don't have a community. So out of the loneliness, there is, and you may not be aware of any of this. Now that you've been forced into starvation, a lot of people out there, you find them to be somewhat attractive. How old are you? 18, 19. Do you have like decision-making power? No, you're just a kid. Do you take this guy home to meet your parents so your parents can put the stamp of okay? No, because that's not the way this culture works. So you experiment and you call it love. All coming out of loneliness and utter desperation. This is a pleasure-driven culture. You don't consider your future. I think Karl Marx was right when he looked at capitalism and argued that eventually every single person in a capitalistic environment turns into a prostitute. All of us become that. You don't write essays because you want to explore how you think about things. You write for a grade. You don't go out with someone because you're sufficient. You come from a healthy background. You're just broken, shattered into 1,000 pieces. You're desperate for someone to give you an ounce of attention and care and love. So when you put all of those things together, you realize that people really don't want to hurt other people, especially those closest to them. But in the end, they find themselves starving. If you see this to be a problem, I don't think there is a remedy. If you don't see it as a problem, then it's okay. And part of it really has to do with just the cultural narratives. You're just fed certain stories, and you buy those stories, and you live those stories. If I was your dad, I'm not, but if I was, I would force a breakup so you can love me more. Then I'd force you to stay in school, bachelor's, master's, PhD. By then you'll be 27, 28. You have a brain that to some extent knows how to think healthily about certain things. And now that you have your degrees, it's very much like a relationship. You come to realize, oh, really? I did all this work, 10 years of school for this piece of paper? It means nothing. You're right, it doesn't mean anything. And then you have a job, you make some money, now it's time for you to get married. And now you do. And then 6 months later, I'd force you to have children. And now you have a full life. It doesn't mean it's a good life. And it doesn't mean it's meaningful. But it does mean that your life will be profoundly busy and you will get lost in the busyness of life. And despite how empty it may be, it will give you the illusion of being meaningful. And that's all you need. Why the hell would you want to invest in a guy who's like a business going bankrupt? A 20-year-old boy is a bankrupt human being. The only place you're going to go is down. He's going to bankrupt you as well, and that's what happens. And people don't do it intentionally, I assure you. We are not psychopaths, at least most of us. We walk into things very naively, innocently, earnestly, and then midway we realize this is really not what we want, but it's too late, and then things happen. If that's a little difficult to grasp, you have a home to go to, right? But sometimes you go on vacation and you stay in a motel. That's what cheating is. You go to a motel for a couple of days, but eventually you drive back home. And just because you spend a couple of nights in a motel, it doesn't mean that you hate your home. I mean, it may be that you just have a toxic environment in which you live, but for the most part, that's what crossing certain lines mean. You go to a motel, spend a few days there, do whatever, and then you go back home. You also have a great amount of guilt for what you have done. And it's not because you've been caught, just something about you just feels bad. And part of the guilt really has to do with cultural narratives again. You don't live in a polygamous environment, it's a monogamous environment, but you've crossed certain lines. And that particular narrative has the power to kind of just ruin a couple of weeks of your life. And then if you don't have the capacity, you look at your companion and you say, honey, we need to sit. What is it? I gotta tell you something. What? I feel really bad. So, I mean, consider what happened to Bill Clinton. It's a tragic story. And a tragic story, the Greeks were really, really good in creating tragedies. And the way I take tragedies is the following. I have a lot of students, and the semester is ending. And they've done relatively an okay job in classes, whether it's online or in person. But it's crunch time now. So when I look at their essays, some of them are like 100% AI generated. Some of them are like 90%. And that's what they call a tragedy. A student who signed up for a class to really learn a few things, was excited, interested, all of a sudden find themselves in an environment where they don't have the time or the patience or the intellectual capacity to sit and look at a problem for 5, 6, 7 hours and then express it in writing. So they just put a few things in Google and or ChatGPT, and you have a beautiful essay that spits out, and then you submit that. And what the Greeks want to tell us is human beings are really born to grow wings and fly to the heavens, to live a life that's creative, that's inspiring, that's beautiful. But life happens, and the only thing that they're left with is a good amount of regret. I don't fall in love with you to have you cheat on me, or for me to cheat on you. But I never examined the nature of relationships, pleasure, the time factor, boredom, the fact that human greed and lust is just, there's no limit to them. I invest, you invest, and then I come to class and I look at Iska, and for some reason I say I want him or her. Did I intend for that? No. Did it happen? Yes. Can I stop it? I can. But there are lots of things that need to take place. For the longest time in our human culture, culture would stop you, religion would stop you, the fear of God would stop you. But remove all of that. Your name, your reputation, your kids, your wife, your husband, your parents, neighbors. Makes things are just fucked up. Abi, thank you for your note, your email. Thank you. Yes, Quinn.
Why do you think so many people avoid like feeling or doing or thinking about things that they don't like that they find.
So, if I understand you, you and I are in a relationship. I look at you, I want to kill myself. You look at me, you want to kill yourself because it has outlived its usefulness. You want to get out, I want to get out, but it's a little tough. Maybe you become addicted to me, as I have towards you. And so we stay in it, knowing full well that it's going nowhere. And then once in a while, as you're driving home, you say, when I go home, I'm going to make some food. Amir and I are going to sit at the table and we're going to have a long, meaningful conversation about our relationship and its potential demise. So you come home and you say, Amir, love, what do you want to eat? I say, pizza. Say, okay. I have no idea what's coming to me. So we sit and he said, well, I want to talk to you about something. What is it? It's about us. Yeah, I love you. So, okay, well, how do I go from there? Say, yeah, well, what do you think about going to Yosemite? Okay. I don't think we have the proper tools to deal with anything that's difficult. I mean, distraction is a wonderful thing. I was talking to my dean yesterday, I had a meeting. It's just really difficult to be honest. And whenever you become aware of anything that you find to be true, it's really difficult to express it because not only does it pain you, it also pains you when you see you've been the cause of pain in another. So it's best not to talk about it. Yeah. I think that's the problem with all these people, whether it's Gandhi or the Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad. They have such dark philosophies of life, and it's because it's so honest. So, good luck. Carmen? The what? Intrusive what? Thoughts? You go to a party and you see, and I'm going to talk within the heterosexual context. I go to a party and there is a woman fully covered from head to toe. You know, one of those funny women from Yemen. The only thing you can see is like two eyes coming out of this tent. And then there is another woman. And she's showing a lot of skin. Sure, the woman in tent becomes a thing of curiosity. I wonder what she looks like underneath all of that. But there is no curiosity about this other woman, you can see. She imposes herself on you. Her skin does. Her beauty does. She just breaks down the door and comes in. With the Yemeni woman, I have to make a lot of effort, and that's tough. But with the other one, he just barges in. So the first thing about anything that's intrusive is that they have seen something about you, or you have seen something about them that you find interesting. And oftentimes it's not a passing thing. It keeps knocking on your door and saying, I'm here. And the more you nourish it, the more it's going to knock on your door. Can I tell you something kinky? You know what kinky is? No, I'm not talking about Thomas Kincaid. Kinky. There is a practice that is usually observed by those who practice the art of lovemaking. The ancient Hindus, the ancient Taoists, the ancient Buddhists, go all the way back to the Kemet school in Africa and certain parts of Egypt, Samaria. So it's kind of like this. You love someone, okay? But you don't know if you love them for their body, if you love them for their mind. You don't know if you want long term, if you want short term. So you know what they do. Before you actually become intimate with them, they ask you to pleasure yourself. It's like you're really, really, really hungry and you want to spend like $50 Zachary's. So what you do is you stay home and you have a couple of sandwiches, peanut butter, jelly, and then you go to Zachary's and then realize, nah, you don't really want to have pizza, you're full. And you realize that your desire for Zachary's was nothing but a temptation, nothing more. So once you get yourself to climax, and once you go over the climax, then they sit you next to the person that you claim to love. Do you still want to be with them? Do you still want to have sex with them? Do you still want to have a conversation with them? Or do you want to just go home and be left alone? In other words, do you still want to be with the thing that you desired once you're satisfied? Maybe those people are crazy, I don't really know, but I think it's an interesting set of practices and rituals. If you connect your question to Cadence's question, you have a boyfriend and you have a study group and the guy sitting next to you, his name is like Brandon, and his chemistry or biology, and you guys study for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours every other day. And then you pick up your stuff, you go back home to your boyfriend, Johnny. And as you're walking home, the image of Brandon just intrudes. And then you push it away, you go back home. And as you spend more time with Brandon, his image becomes more pronounced. And then you're in bed with your boyfriend, Johnny, and you guys are having a lovely moment of intimacy. But instead of you looking at your boyfriend and seeing Johnny, you see your boyfriend, but you see Brandon. Why? Well, you spend time with Brandon. And whenever you spend time with anything, emotions grow, attachments grow, intimacy grows, emotionally, intellectually, and then ultimately, that's how it happens. Some years ago, I went home and I realized the lights are on. I was almost sure I had turned all the lights off. But I didn't think twice. I just go home and I realized that the windows are broken. Some people had come in, taken a few things. And I felt so violated. To this day, and this is an episode that took place, 20 years ago almost. Every time I go home, I usually ask the wife and the kids to stay in the car. because I'm a big, strong man, you know. But let me first go and see what's going on. Sometimes you have an experience where you feel as if at any moment someone could just break in, or maybe have, and there's a nasty surprise waiting for you. If that makes any sense. Some intrusions are really, really, really good. If you have a loser of a boyfriend, and let's say you take a psychology class and it talks about human relationships for 16 weeks, and the ideas that you get from that class keeps, you know, disrupting the flow of your relationship, it's actually quite good. He's 18. He's a scumbag. He's a creep. So at a certain point, because of the ideas, you just go home and say, get out. I don't want to be with you anymore. Saves you time, saves you money. So. Do you want to tell me what those thoughts are? Oh, Jesus Christ. So, you should go home. Do you have Netflix? Do you have Prime? Do you have a TV? There's a Korean movie. You'll love it. I Saw the Devil. Have you heard of the movie? Oh, it's so beautiful. It's a guy who likes to like kill people and eat them. I mean, it's really nice. You should watch it. I've watched it maybe 20 times. It's more of a release of any like violent tendencies that you yourself may have. There's some nice elements in it. And once in a while, when I'm with the kids, I think about the movie. But they never come to life, really. It just stays up here. And they make me more creative. Other ways of torturing my kids. Quinn?
Why do you think people want to identify as but not just as himself, but like?
Well, it happens very, very early on. You adopt your father's last name. You see them. Your family is the first group you get yourself involved with, and they give you meaning, they give you protection. You're not really like an outcast in the middle of nowhere, not knowing anyone when you feel abandoned. There is something about us that from a very young age desires to be cared for, and there is someone always on the outside, hopefully, who's going to care for us. That in itself creates a community. In community, there is bonding, there is love, there is faith, there is security, there is meaning, there is belonging. Just in case you run into a problem, you go to your father. Just in case you have a question about your math, you go to your mom. Just in case they're not home, you go to your aunt, you go to your uncle. That's your community. At a certain point, you gain a bit more autonomy, and that has to do initially with your stage of adolescence, where you kind of look at your parents and they say, well, they're creeps, really. My father is wrong and my mother is wrong and they haven't really done anything for me. You want to go out there and kind of be your own person. But when you go out there, what you do is you want to look for mirrors. In other words, you're going to look for people who look like you, feel like you, taste like you, smell like you, think like you, walk like you, fly like you. And so from one community, you begin to go looking for another community. It's maybe your emotional community now, maybe your intellectual community, who the hell knows, but you want to belong to a space where other people are there as well, where you can express yourself. And one of the things about us is that, we talked about this before, life creates a lot of pressure. I mean, it just devastates us on a daily basis, not just life on the outside, life on the inside. You begin to ask yourself a lot of like ridiculous questions. I mean, they're profound, but there are no answers to them. And they leave you confused, they leave you angry. But then there is life itself, taking all these classes. You have a biology test in a couple of hours. You don't even know why the hell you have to take that class. I mean, you're doing business. You know, you want to make money. Not you don't want to like go into a lab and get involved in biology in a deep way, right? And you realize the culture imposes itself on you. Education does, other people do, and so you need a venting mechanism. And if there is no one, you're going to go nuts. I mean, you're not like the cousin of Prophet Muhammad in the Islamic tradition, where he realized that he really enjoys being solitary. Even though he's married, even though he has kids, he finds himself profoundly detached. And so when life becomes too much, when his garbage bin is full, he walks a great distance and he finds a well and he sticks his head into this well and screams, and the well screams back. It echoes back. And all of a sudden he says, well, I'm not alone after all, okay? But I'm not as profound as he is, and neither are you, okay? And so we need other people as a backboard of sorts, where you can scream and they can scream back and comfort you. And maybe the both of you can share in similar sorts of anger or joy or whatever. But to belong to any community, you need confirmation, you need validation, and you mimic, and you plagiarize. And sometimes you alter your own behavior to be accepted. Okay? I mean, when people come to my office, I don't know who they are, I don't know what they are, I don't know how they live their lives, but when they come to my office, they behave a certain way. It may not be genuine for them, but that particular aspect of who and what they become when they enter into my office is an imposition. Now, if they keep doing that, that imposition become part of who and what they are. Okay? But why they come to my office? They like me, let's just say. Okay? And they will behave in a way that will be acceptable to me. And the moment you like something, you're going to change your ways for you to continue to be liked. Imagine I like you, and you got stupid, ridiculous friends. What am I going to do? Say your friends suck? I will say, but not to you. I'll just whisper it to myself. Why? Because the moment I say your friends suck, they're an extension of who and what you are. You're going to say, well, if he doesn't like my friends, he doesn't probably like me. And if he doesn't like me, why the hell is he with me? I'm just going to call him and say, cancel the date. Well, I don't want my date with you to be canceled. So what will I do? I will tolerate your BS. Knowingly or unknowingly. And if I grow to the stage of loving you, I am more than willing to put my desires, my passions, my rights and wrongs all on the cross to be sacrificed just for you. And if you go back to Cadence's question, there's going to come a time where I realize that I no longer like you as much or love you as much, and I'm going to go back to the person I've always been. Now I'll come out and say, Quinn, your friends really do suck, and I don't want to hang out with them. So we are social animals. You need other people to survive. One thing that I learned, unfortunately, very, very late in life, one of the nice things about doing philosophy for me is that it removed people from my life. And even when I got together with my friends, we only played music. They loved philosophy. They were students of life, very, very good students, much better than I. But we rarely spoke about philosophy. We just sat and played music. We expressed ourselves through the instruments and through singing. Those were the only friends I had. The rest were students. What happens is, when you become more and more sufficient, it's like having your fridge always filled with food. You have less need for Costco. You have less need for Safeway. And if you have less need for Costco or Safeway, you have less need to get in your car and travel to Safeway or Costco. You can always be at home. The more self-sufficient you become, the less you need other people. Because when you need other people, you have no choice but to somehow manipulate the way you are so they can be comfortable. Sometimes my parents come to my house and I find myself completely exhausted, but I need them to like me. I also know that because they're my parents, I need to take care of them. These are like just pressures, just keep adding onto you. And there comes a point where your back begins to bend and you get sick. So what I came to realize is that if I can put myself on a good diet physically, And if I can be sufficient with just going to my office or staying home and just writing, and just continuously building shed after shed, room after room, kitchen after kitchen, and because I know these things, I know how to make them, I know how to build them. The only thing I need is a nice car. I can go to Home Depot, just buy the stuff, go to the car wash or go to the backyard, spend hours there. I will have no need for people and no need for conversation. I can do that when I write. And you realize the only person that you really need to please, to be validated by, is yourself. But you need to have, to some extent, an image of yourself through practice, through application, that you know that you can write well. And so when you sit to write, what you expect from yourself is a writing that to some extent you can sit back and say, wow, this is nice, I like this. So you only want to please you. Initially, though, before you get to that place, you need to and when you're young, it's very difficult to get there because you don't have very much power in life. You're just young. You're 18, 19, 20. I went to my teacher in complete confusion. And when you're confused, you're like poor. And when you're poor, you'll eat anything. I was just very lucky that I ran into a guy that was not a charlatan. He became my only friend. And then it was Mehrdad and Hussein, another Hussein. I only had 2 friends and 1 teacher. And they sustained me for the next 20 years. Anyways, that's all. Abi? Cadence?
You still grow individually while being in a relationship?
No. I mean, you can, but the relationship won't work. Let me give you an example. And I'm going to borrow this from one of my very, very good friends who died in the 1950s, I think, or 60s, or 50s, or 40s. His name was G.I. Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was a really, really good teacher. Did he have flaws? Absolutely. He had a school, and he interviewed people. And he didn't want lazy people, he didn't want stupid people, and he certainly didn't want people who didn't have any common sense. One time he had this woman who wanted to be a student. He said, okay, have you ever had like chocolate ice cream with mustard on it? And the woman said, no. Chocolate ice cream with mustard, it's delicious. The woman put some mustard on her ice cream, and Gurdjieff kicked her out. He said, if you're that stupid, where you lose your common sense altogether, I don't need to have you here. Okay. There was a woman by the name of Olga de Hartmann. She had a husband named Thomas de Hartmann. And they were seekers after truth, if you want to call it that. So they meet him, the husband and wife, Thomas and Olga. At a certain point, Olga, the woman, goes to Gurdjieff and says, listen, I very much enjoy you and I enjoy your teaching. I think you're profound. But my husband loves you and I love you too. But I don't think I can do your program. It's too much for me. What I will do, though, is I will continue to stay with you, but only to help my husband. Is that okay? And he says, the only thing I ask is don't ruin our relationship. I love my husband, and I don't know what you teach, and I don't know how you teach. All I want is, I want to be with God, yes, but I also want to keep my husband. Just promise me that your teachings will not mess up my relationship. And she said that Gurdjieff all of a sudden looks at me very, very seriously and earnestly and says to me, I will not ruin your relationship, but you will. Says, how? Says, you will help your husband go from step 1 to step 2 on the ladder. You will also still be able to reach him to go from step 2 to step 3 of the ladder. And remember, every time you go higher, you begin to see things differently. And then you will also be able to help him go from step 3 on the ladder to step 4. And every time you see things differently, you add meaning to the words you use. your perspectives about things become more complex, more seasoned. Okay? There will come a point where he wants to go from step 4 to step 5, but you will no longer reach him. And he will no longer want to come back down to reach you because he's now changed. If you change by yourself without your husband changing at the same time, you yourself will be the cause of the downfall of your relationship, not because you want to. If you go to school and get your PhD and your husband's a construction worker, he wants to talk about rebars, cinder blocks, 2x4s. You, on the other hand, you may want to talk about social justice and he's not interested. You guys speaking different language. You may have kids together. You may still live together. But the sort of intimacy, emotional intimacy that you used to have, intellectual intimacy, is no longer going to be there. If you're able to change, but keep those changes to yourself without having them leak out into the relationship, you'll be fine. One of the difficulties with getting into relationships when you are immature, and by immature I mean you lack the experience, and you have not yet reached a maturity that comes with living life, going through rites of passages. In this culture, rite of passage is when you get your license, when you start drinking, when you start smoking, when you leave your parents' house. I mean, these are like stupid rites of passages that amount to nothing but disaster. Okay? In most of the cultures, a rite of passage is when your grandmother calls you into the study or the kitchen. And your father says, you need to come to me to work, you know, or it's time for you to do A, B, C, D. You know what the Jewish tradition has, to some extent. So what happens is you get into the relationship for all the wrong reasons. Little by little, you walk into life, being in relationships, and life is going to change you. And as you change, well, you're going to look at your relationship that was built on the foundation of immaturity. You're going to look at it differently. It's going to be less satisfying. But going back to your question, if you can keep things to yourself, you'll be fine. I mean, it'll be tough, but you'll be fine. It'll be like being pregnant with emotions and thoughts, but never giving labor because your husband is far too incompetent to receive them. Yeah.
You can grow and change individually from walking in a relationship, but ultimately it'll ruin it.
Yeah.
So wait for that not to.
Yeah.
Besides, yourself.
There are a couple of things. First, relationships have always been tricky. Unfortunately, we are not like tables and chairs. You come back here after 20 years, that'll still be a chair. In 20 years' time, you'll be very, very different. You're always changing. Always. Now, some people can change from the foundation. Some people only change surface, the branches. Sometimes you only cut branches of a tree, but you leave the trunk there. Sometimes you just get rid of the trunk. The changes that are going to happen to you for the most part, you know, your trunk is going to change, depending again on your circumstances, what you get yourself involved with and all those things, okay? If the branches change, it's okay, the relationship will survive. If the foundation changes, that's a very, very different story. If I was to give you a very, very simple example, and forgive me for the nature of my analogy, but nevertheless, imagine you and I were to go out. I'm 60, Cadence. I don't do 18-year-olds anymore. I don't have the fun that 18-year-olds do. I don't want sex every day. I don't want conversation every day. I don't want to hang out with your friends. I don't care about your life. But I will manipulate you to love me. Which means that instead of me coming down to your stupid world, you have to come to my world. Which means what? If you're 18, you have to behave like a 40-year-old woman. And if you love me enough, you will do that. And because of my age, I will die in 2 years. But you will have rich memories. But now you have to go back in life. What, you think you can date 25-year-olds? No. You've been exposed to a different world, a better world. A 25-year-old has nothing to offer you, which means that 5 years from now, you're still going to change. Things about you are always going to be different, but not when you stay with me. I will demand that you think a certain way, feel a certain way, live a certain way. You can't dress like this when you come to my parents' house. And you can't talk the way you do when you come to my parents' house. Everything about you will change for the better. You won't be 20. And just in case you look at my mom and say, well, I want to do A, B, C, D, she'll tell you no. She'll drown you in the culture, in the narratives. She'll demand that you become different. And all of a sudden you realize you're 20, but you're behaving like a 40-year-old. You're much more future-oriented. You care for yourself in a different way. You look at yourself differently. Now that is a good change to go through. And with that change, when you go back to your old life, once I'm dead, once my parents are dead, you realize maybe you don't want to live in this culture. So the more profound your experiences, the more profound the changes, and the less able you are to go back to the old world. But the more superficial the changes, the less they're going to impact you. But also understand, going back to Quinn's question, because honesty is difficult, because expressing honesty is difficult, regardless of the changes you're going through, you will rarely express them to your companion. The status quo will continue, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can't make the changes. Changes usually come from the outside. Someone will push you to see certain things, to experience certain things, and then it's going to sit uncomfortably with you. And then the wrestling match will begin. So, Quinn?
What happens if somebody really doesn't want to change themselves? The idea they don't want it to be more complicated, so they really.
Imagine that you and I were to meet. Okay, I have some age, some experience, you have some age, some experience. What relationships usually do, if you wanted to survive, is I need to know your boundaries. I need to know your capacities. I need to know mine. There are certain areas in my life you have no right to walk into. I'm very, very, very private. Don't walk into that. There are things about myself that you have no right to ask. You won't know that initially. And you may once in a while come to me and say, Amir, you're so closed. Amir, you're so detached. Amir, you're so this. I say, Quinn, I'm like a 60-year-old man. You met me when I was like 35 or 40. I'm not going to change. This is the way I am. Accept it. And there are things about you. Let's just say you have some issues with your dad. Well, I will know that when it comes to certain conversations, this is a place I can't go. And I don't want you to be open about that. And perhaps you yourself don't want to be open about that. So once you and I become familiar with the lines that we have created for ourselves, we just tiptoe around them. Unless you do what my father did. He married my mom when she was 15. He was 27, 28. And he comes from a male-dominated environment. Women, for the most part, remain in the background. Okay? And so if you were to look at my parents, they think the same. They feel the same. They can't live for too long apart from one another. They're in agreement on basically everything. And my father has come to realize that, 90% of the time he just needs to say yes to my mom. But that took about, 80 years for him to learn. if you marry someone or get involved with someone at a very, very young age, eventually the two of you will become very much the same. You'll smell the same. But the way you are now at your age, there are certain lines. And I'm sure your companion will want to push you to change a few things. You may want to because you like him or maybe even love him, but you can't. You know, it's like asking a black man to look at the white man and think about the white culture differently. You can't. You know, after all these years of slavery and imposition and cruelty, all of a sudden what? Because you take a class with him, you want him to be different or look at you different? It's not going to happen. You know, this is no way to end a semester. What time is it, by the way?
10:45.
What time are we done?
10:45.
What time is it?
Hi.
And we're done at 10:45? Are you sure? I thought it's 11:45. Connor?
This year.
I'm just kidding, yeah. So, is there anything you guys want to say before we go our own ways? Jesus Christ, Connor, it doesn't have to be so dry and boring. Come, give me a hug. What? No, I'll give you a hug.
I'll get out. Thank you.
Oh man, it's good to meet you. Yeah,
Thank you for everything.
I miss coming to class and watching you drinking Coke for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
That's all you need.
Yeah. Well, as Mr. Spock would say, live long and healthy, prosperous. Fatima, good to meet you. Good luck. Quinn? Cadence? Carmen? Nailen? Nice hair. Mix? And Arman is there.
I'm gonna come to your office tomorrow morning.
What time?
You said on your syllabus,
Yeah, the syllabus, yeah, that's...
around like, 8 or 9 o'clock?
Not 9, I have class at 9. And 8, I'm like watching a movie on
What
YouTube.
will be your best time?
We can talk right now for a few minutes. Iska, just in case I don't see you, good luck. If you need a letter of recommendation, let me know.
I'll probably be around.
Don't forget, big schools. Not Cal East Bay, not San Francisco. I mean, they're great schools, but, you know, go somewhere big.
See what I can find. Thank you.
If you need anything, let me know.
I can do that.
And tell your daughter I said hi.
I can do that as well. Good luck.
Take care. You don't have to leave, you can stay. But if you want to leave, you can as well. You have a biology test. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You too. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good